How am I doing? Good evening and welcome to our midweek Bible study. On Thursday nights, we're going through the Bible book by book and chapter by chapter and verse by verse. And tonight, we are in the book of Ecclesiastes. Last week, we finished chapter 1. We're going to pick it up tonight and, Lord willing, make it through chapter 2. So I'll invite you to turn there in your Bibles for those of you that are online. And for those of you here, you're probably already there. So again, really looking forward to what the Lord has for us tonight. As we make our way through chapter 2, it's going to become abundantly clear that Solomon is learning the hard way. I don't know if this is going to date me for you younger people. You have no idea. I think it was back in the 70s. I don't know if you remember the Fram oil filter commercial, where the guy would get on TV and he would hold up this Fram oil filter and he would say, "You can pay me now or you can pay me later." Oh, you do remember that. That has stuck with me all these years, because the whole point was, you can pay me now for this filter, way more better, or you can pay me later when it's going to be way more expensive because you're going to be paying for a new engine. So there's the easy way and there's the hard way. And I don't know what it is, and I'll speak for myself, but I have to learn the hard way, and I have the scars to prove it. Oh, I wish that maybe you're different. If you are, praise the Lord. You're saving yourself a lot of heartache, a lot of misery, a lot of problems, a lot of trouble. But there are just some of us that have to learn the hard way. And such is the case with Solomon. Sometimes, really, I would even venture to say most of the time, we only learn by suffering the consequences of our sin and our folly and the emptiness that will always ensue. And it's almost like we have to go through it. You know, here God is saying, don't do that. I'm trying to save you from unnecessary and needless pain and suffering. So don't do this. And I think about Solomon. The kings were commanded not to multiply for themselves wives, horses, and gold. And what does Solomon do? He multiplies for himself wives, horses, and gold. Now, why? I'm trying to protect you from that which will happen to you if you do this. It's not like God is saying, don't do this because I'm God and I said so. No, I'm trying to protect you. I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to spare you. And so, what do? We do it anyway, and then we realize, oh my goodness, that's why God said, don't do this, because look what's happened as a result of me doing this. And we end up, maybe, thankfully, we do learn. Some never learn, right? But it really is a thing of having to learn the hard way. You know that saying, been there, done that? I think some have added to it. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. Well, I think Solomon would say, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, and I had to learn the hard way. It wasn't worth it, but it was almost like he had to go through all of this in order to learn it. Sometimes there's just no other way. You know, in parenting, I was thinking about this. In parenting, sometimes, you can try to teach your children, and you would hope that they'll just learn the lesson and be spared of the consequences of their disobedience. But they don't. And then sometimes you just have to sit helplessly by and watch them make all of the mistakes, suffer the consequences that always come, and just hope and pray that at least they'll learn the lesson that way. At least they'll learn it that way. I wish it weren't that way, but sometimes it almost has to be that way. Had they never gone through that, they would have never learned that. So here with Solomon, as we'll see, he tries everything he can, every way he can, only to realize that not only does nothing satisfy, it actually leaves you even emptier than you were in the first place. And the reason for that is because only God can satiate that thirst, that hunger that we have in our souls. Nothing will fill that void. Oh, it might satisfy but for a season, but it's not long before you realize, and again, you learn the hard way, at the end of the day, oh my goodness, this is, not only has this not satisfied me, I'm more miserable now than I was to begin with because of it. But here's the thing, I imagine God just waiting ever so patiently in all of his long suffering, as if to say, I know that you have to learn it this way, so I'll just be here. When you come to the end of yourself and you throw up your hands and you say, oh God, and it's almost like God is saying, well, it's about time. You realize now, yes, I do. You understand now, yes, I do. You know now why I said don't do this. Yes, I do. Well, let's jump in, verse 1. Solomon writes, verse 1, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure. But surely this also was vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? In other words, I set my heart, I even tested my heart, and I said to my heart, just have your fill and enjoy all of the pleasures available to you. And even descend into just this partying, laughing, enjoying, and only to realize that it's all empty and it accomplishes nothing. Now that's interesting to me, because God created us to have purpose and this sense of accomplishment. I know this might be maybe difficult at first to grasp, but do you realize that there's going to be work in heaven? That work was blessed before sin entered the world. Adam and Eve were created and they were given this garden to work with the work of their hands. And when sin entered and the curse with it, then work was cursed by the sweat of our brow. But when we're in eternity, in the new heavens and the new earth, we are going to be working, and it is going to be a joy because we were created to work. You ever hear those stories about guys who retire and it's just like, they just do nothing? And they just kind of, I think about it like this, and I know this might be a silly illustration, but God didn't create us to sit in a recliner with a remote. That's pretty bad, isn't it? Well, if you have a better one, let me know afterwards, and I'll certainly replace it. But he didn't create us to do nothing, and he also did not create us to have our fill of pleasure. I was thinking about this too. You know why these famous people go crazy and insane and mad and oftentimes commit suicide? It's because God never created them to be on the receiving end of that much worship and adoration. It just goes against the very nature of who we are, created in God's image. You know, there's this sense of accomplishment. And what Solomon is saying is, I had my fill of the party life. I mean, we just got done reading in chapter 1 where he set his mind and heart to achieve knowledge, and it was almost like he enrolled in this, college and wanted to seek and pursue this, thinking that that would satisfy. Apart from God, nothing will satisfy. But again, keep in mind, he's trying to do this apart from God. He's under the sun, S-U-N, and that's the problem. He's not under the sun, S-O-N. And no matter what he tries, no matter what he does, no matter what he tries to do, it's never going to fill that void. And he comes to the end of it and he says, it accomplishes absolutely nothing. And I think about the party life. You can party all you want, but you're going to come to this realization that not only is it accomplishing nothing, it is actually leaving me emptier than I was before. Why? Because God never created me for that. He created me in his image. Verse 3, I search in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their lives. I made my works great. Listen to this list of everything he built, and you can go to Israel today and you'll see the remains of all that Solomon had amassed, all the buildings he built. He says, I built myself houses plural. How many houses can you live in at one time? And planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I built theme parks and water parks, just to bring it into a modern day context. Verse 7, I acquired male and female servants and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. Because he could. He had seemingly limitless wealth. The wealth that Solomon had, some estimate, was incalculable. He was so wealthy and he spared himself nothing. And he kept building. And here's how it looks like and sounds like in our life. If only I had, and you fill in the blank, then I'd be happy. If only I could, and you fill in the blank, I'll be happy. And what you find is you're like the woman at the well. And Jesus says to her, you can continue to drink of this water and you will thirst again. But if you drink of the water that I have to offer, you will never thirst. Here's the point. You can never satiate a spiritual need with a physical supply. You can do all you want. You can build all you want. You can add all you want. You can all you get and get all you can. But at the end of the day, you will realize it does not satisfy. I forget who it was, but he was asked, he was very wealthy, how much more wealth do you want to accumulate? And his answer was something to the effect of just a little bit more. In other words, you could never quite get to that point. So you get that which you want, you think it's going to make you happy, it doesn't make you happy, so what do? You try to get more. You know, they did an interesting study, this is many, many years ago, and it was basically a secular study, basically trying to determine the happiness of those making a certain amount of money annually. Let's just use $50,000. Of course, boy, this is really an old study, certainly not applicable to us today living in Hawaii, but let's just use $50,000 a year for purpose of illustration. And what they found was that the people that were earning $50,000 a year were just as happy as those making many times more than that. And the point of the study, and this was the takeaway from it, that once you have your basic needs met, you're content. And so you can go out and amass all of this wealth. It's not going to make you happier. In fact, the opposite is true. You know what happens? And Solomon's going to allude to that here towards the end of the chapter. So you amass all this wealth. You think, okay, now I can just sit back in that recliner we talked about with the remote and just enjoy my life and live happily ever after. No, you're not. Because now that you've amassed all of that, now you're going to be worried about keeping it. See, I heard it said this way. Perfect. You strive to gain, you'll strive to maintain. So here you're striving, you're pursuing. And by the way, this whole thing of the pursuit of happiness, nah. The pursuit of happiness? No. Here's what it is. Jesus in Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added unto you. That's what you're to pursue. You're to pursue the Lord and seek first him and his righteousness, and he'll take care of everything else. If that's your pursuit, you will be satiated. If you're pursuing happiness, you're never going to find it. You know what pursuing happiness is like? I like how one said it. It's like chasing a butterfly. You're never going to grasp it. Solomon basically likens it to trying to grasp and catch the wind. You're never going to catch it. You can pursue it, try to grab it, you're never going to get it. That's what pursuing happiness is like. And God never created us for the pursuit of happiness. God created us for the pursuit of him. You know, so many times we pursue things thinking that if I could just have this, then I won't have to, it's going to, and then I get it, that's all I need. Yeah, I was just thinking about this. My wife, for 10 years we couldn't have children, and we were told that we had what they called unexplained infertility. We would get pregnant, we would lose the baby in pregnancy and by way of a miscarriage. One time it was an ectopic pregnancy. And so for 10 years we couldn't have children. And it was the cry of our heart. We ached for, we longed for, we cried for, we prayed for, we longed for children. And then when our son was born, my wife came to me. It was probably one of the most profound, simple truths that I can ever look back to. And she said to me, she said, honey, I thought that what I really longed for was to have a child, have a son. But what I realized now that we have a son was what I really longed for was the Lord. It's that seeking first, pursuing first and foremost him, and then he adds everything else. Listen, if you're not satisfied in the Lord, even with the Lord, nothing's going to satisfy. You can pursue whatever you want, all you want. It will never satisfy you because that is the way God created us. You know, I realize this is just words on a page in our Bible, but you have to understand that this was massive. I suppose it would be appropriate to compare what Solomon had amassed and all of the buildings and the vineyards and the water and everything the houses, everything he built would be like owning the entirety of the island of Oahu. And he owned it all. And all of the people, they were his employees, as it were. He had could you think about what Jesus said, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world, the whole island of Oahu, and loses his own soul? I mean, you can acquire it, amass it, achieve it, and if your pursuit is not for him, you will have all of this, and you will say, what? I am so unsatisfied. I'm not happier. In fact, I'm more miserable. I don't sleep at night. You know, when I had nothing, I slept better, right? Oh, thank you, John. Look at this. Thank you so much. You brought me two. What are you trying to tell me? I'm going to end up in the bathroom now, in the middle of the teaching. Yeah, we're good. Thank you, John. Pardon me. I have a frog in my throat. Farag in my throat, yeah. Sorry. Couldn't resist. So, where was I? It was deeply profound, I'm sure, whatever I was saying. But, oh yeah, you can, again, when you amass all of these things, you'll find that you're more worried. You don't sleep. There's more anxiety. Because now the fear is keeping it, holding on to it, not losing it. And it actually, I'm sure you've heard about the statistics of those who win the lottery. You would think that, oh my goodness, they win, $500 jillion. Some of these jackpots, again, on the mainland, what like $350 million or something? And wasn't there one time for like in the billions or $1 or $2 billion? That's a lot of money. It's one of those things where you say, Lord, can we just try and, see how I'll tithe on it. Nice try. But they follow these people that win the lottery, and you would think, oh my goodness, they've got it made in the shade, as we say. And the opposite is true. Their lives are destroyed. Their marriages are destroyed. Their families, their children, it ruins their lives. And sometimes they'll interview them and ask them questions about it. And almost without exception, they'll say something to the effect of, this was the worst thing that ever happened to me. You would think it would be the best thing that could ever happen, right? You quit your job and you sit in that recliner, and boy, I'm really picking on, so go home and burn that recliner and the remote with it. But I could just sit in the recliner and here's the remote and just, live happily ever after. You're going to be the most miserable person because God never created you like that. He never created you to be like that. Well, I don't want to get too far off into that. Too late, already did. Verse 8. It gets better or worse, however you want to look at it. Solomon says, I also gathered for myself silver and gold. Oh, God said, don't do that. Remember? Lots of gold. And the special treasures of kings and of provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. And this is interesting. Also, my wisdom remained with me. That's interesting. Why? Because he had the wisdom. You know, God's gifts and callings are without repentance. So God gave him this supernatural wisdom. Remember when God came to him and said, you can have anything you want? And Solomon says, you know what I really need is I need wisdom to rule your people, because I don't even know how to appropriately walk to the throne, let alone, lead your people. And God's response was, well, because you didn't ask for wealth and riches, and also, a very interesting detail, and also because you did not ask for the destruction of your enemies. Oh my goodness, I would have totally asked for that. I would have said, oh, anything? Really? Okay, here's my list. And he didn't ask for any of that. Which to me, that God would say that says to me that was on the table. Because isn't it true? If we could have anything we want, I mean, we would, yes, wealth beyond measure. I would like for you to take care of them and that and this and this and this and this. And Solomon says, no, I just need wisdom. So what does God do? Well, you know the story. He gives them both, because he was seeking first the wisdom from above, the righteousness of God and his kingdom. And because he asked for that, God gave him all of the above. And wealth, unspeakable wealth. And so here he says, all throughout all of this, my wisdom remained with me. And I got to believe that wasn't in a good way. My way of thinking, that was tormenting, because he still had that supernatural wisdom. And if he still had that supernatural wisdom, he had to know, because of that wisdom, this isn't going to work out too well. This is not going to end well. All that I'm doing, because he still has the wisdom, that supernatural wisdom of God through all of this. I bet it haunted him. I bet it kept him up at night, among other things that kept him up at night, all the worries about everything. So, verse 10, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. Picture this. You see something, I want it. I'm going to get it, because I can. If I see something, it's kind of like you walk into a store and you have all this wealth. You can buy whatever you want. You see something, I like that, I'll take it. How much is it? Doesn't matter. No, what's the price? Doesn't matter. I'll take it. And I spared no expense, so to speak. Whatever I saw, if I liked it, I desired it, I got it. I did not deprive my eyes of anything. And I just took it. And he says, I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. In other words, so the lust of the heart, that hedonistic pursuit of wanton pleasure, if it seemed pleasing to me, I did it. I did not say to my heart, no, you can't have this. I said to my heart, yeah, you want it? You go ahead. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. And then verse 11, I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled. That's a lot of work. And indeed, all was vanity and grasping for the wind. there was no prophet under the sun, S-U-N, and that's why. He's under the wrong sun. If this was under the sun, S-O-N, as unto the Lord, oh my goodness. Godliness with contentment is great gain, the Apostle Paul would say. I think this speaks to a truth that is, it's a principle you don't break. It breaks you if you go up against it. And the principle is you can be, so poor, just have basic needs met. You have a roof over your head, you have clothes on your back, you have food in the fridge, right? And you can be happier not being able to rub 2 quarters together. It used to be 2 dimes, but inflation, so now it's 2 quarters. And you can be happier than someone like Solomon who has amassed all of this wealth. Because it has nothing to do with what you're able to amass. It has everything to do with being content. The Apostle Paul said, I learned, key word, I learned to be content no matter what my situation. If I had plenty or if I had little, no matter what, I learned to be content. That's the key. That's the key. Verse 12. Then, it's kind of like Solomon saying, I tried this, didn't work out. I tried this, didn't work out. Tried this, didn't work out. Now I'm going to try this. Then I turned myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who succeeds the king? Only what he has already done. In other words, who comes after me? What are they going to do? Whatever they do, it's already been done. I already did it. Verse 13. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes, verse 14, are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceived that the same event happens to them all. So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this also is vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool. Therefore, I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me for all his vanity and grasping for the wind. What's Solomon saying here? What's the conclusion here that Solomon is coming to? He's basically saying at the end of the day, we all die. And isn't death the great equalizer? So he's saying to himself, I have all of this wisdom, I have all of this wealth, and when I die the same way the fool in poverty dies. So why am I wise? What's the point? I mean, it's what's the purpose? It's meaningless. It's emptiness. It's vanity. I mean, what's the point of amassing all of this wealth if I'm going to... And isn't it interesting that when you do amass wealth, and certainly as you get older, what comes into clearer view? Your mortality, the brevity of life. You start thinking about death. Whenever I do a memorial service, Ecclesiastes is the go-to, particularly chapter 7 when we get there. And Solomon has the audacity to say it is better to go to a memorial service, a funeral, than it is to go to a party, to a wedding, to a feast. Why? Because when you go to a memorial service, you're more introspective. you take seriously the brevity of life and how that ultimately there is this thing called death that nobody escapes, unless, of course, you go up in the rapture, which, by the way, is, you start thinking about what's going to happen first, my death or the rapture. I'll take the rapture. Thank you very much. Where do I sign? Can I sign up for that? But it's true that that's how it ends. And so what Solomon is saying here is that in the end, it's really all the same. I'm going to die just like the fool with me, the one in poverty alongside me. It's all vanity. Verse 18, then you would think at some point he would say, okay, God, I've had enough. I've had enough. I've learned my lesson. I wish I would have just learned it the easy way, but okay, I get it now. Enough is enough. But no, not Solomon. He's not done yet, not by a long shot. So now, verse 18, he says, I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun. And here's why. Because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. In other words, I've amassed all this wealth. What for? So I'm going to die and I'm going to leave it to my heir. And what's he going to do? He's going to blow it. Why? Because he didn't work for it. How many people, I know somebody's going to come to mind when I say this, how many people do you know that earn their money the old-fashioned way? They inherited it. And they totally messed up. And it messed them up. And all of the family dynamics and turmoil and conflict and feuds and fights, some of which end up in court, all because of what was left behind. I think I mentioned this one time. Someone was asked when this wealthy guy died, and the question was asked, how much did he leave? To which the answer was, all of it. You can't take it with you. You can send it ahead. You can't take it with you. So here's Solomon going, okay, let me see if I got this straight. I have amassed incalculable wealth, and I'm going to die. Yes, you are, Solomon. You got that right. And when I die, my heir, my son, and oh, by the way, he did have one son with all those wives, all those concubines. He had one son. His name, Rehoboam. Rehoboam single-handedly split Israel into two kingdoms, the north and the south. And not only that, he introduced pagan worship to Israel. And that was the son that he left all of this to. And he knew it. You could say he foreknew it. And this is why, I think this was the late Larry Burkett, who founded Christian Financial Concepts. He had this really clever quip. He said, do your giving while you're living so you're knowing where it's going. That's what, you know who's doing that? I think I mentioned this. You know, on the mainland, you see those big recreational vehicles, and they have a bumper sticker on them that says, we're spending our kids' inheritance. Take that, Rehoboam. So this is what Solomon's saying. I'm going to leave all of this wealth to someone who is ill-equipped, ill-prepared to be able to handle it. Here I toiled, I strived, I worked, I labored, and then I'm going to leave it to somebody? Are you kidding me? And they're going to mess up, and it's going to mess them up? How does that work? It's all vanity. Verse 20, therefore, I turned my heart and by the way, I should probably say that this is not a license to not leave anything for your children. I can just see it now. Hey, did you hear what the preacher said? Yeah, you ain't getting nothing. Yeah, we're buying an RV. We're going to travel. Anyway, yeah. There is actually a proverb, and the parents lay up for the, okay, I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble here, especially if my kids are watching this. But anyway, of course, how am I going to leave them? Anyway, enough of my problems. Verse 20, therefore, I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. For there is a man, verse 21, whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity. And then he adds to this being vanity and says, and a great evil. Whoa, that's kind of strong. He's saying it's cruel and it's evil. It's just wrong. It shouldn't work like that. That is unjust. That is unfair. Verse 22, for what has man for all his labor and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in the night, his heart takes no rest. He can't sleep. This also is vanity. How depressing is this? Are you depressed? I get depressed every time I read it. I just think, oh my goodness, that sort of thing. All of this, for what? It's such a burdensome, sorrowful laboring and toiling and striving by the sweat of my brow. For what? That's what he's saying. But here's the thing. This is God's way of bringing you to that place where you realize, I've done all this for what? And it brings you to him, in some cases back to him, and that's a good thing. And if you have to go through all of this to come to that place, so be it. If in the end it brings me to him, back to him, so be it. It has accomplished its purpose. And here's God again, just waiting patiently, long-suffering, lovingly. You just got to go through this in order to realize this. You're going to learn, but you have to learn it the hard way. I wish it weren't that way, but it is that way. Now we turn a corner as we end the chapter in verse 24, and he says, nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. Now, at first read, you can almost get the impression that he's coming to his senses. He's learned his lesson. It's the hard way, but he's learning, and it's kind of like he's concluding, at the end of the day, you should just enjoy the fruits of your labor. But what he's really saying here is, and it's really kind of been modified for our modern day today. You've doubtless heard it said, you only live once, you only go around once. Might as well just, live it up. You only go around once. That's what he's saying. He's saying, you know, the only thing you can really do is just make the best out of it. Make the best and just enjoy what you got. You only go around once. And he says, this also I saw was from the hand of God. And he expounds on it. For who can eat or who can have enjoyment more than I? In other words, if of all people, there should be somebody that can actually gain this satisfaction and enjoyment in life, it should be me, because I have all this wisdom and I have all this wealth. But then he says, for God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight, but to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. And then he says it again, this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. Here's the conclusion of the matter, and this is how we're going to end the Bible study tonight. I'll try to end on a good note, as depressing as this is. The conclusion of the matter is, this is a fallen world. Life isn't fair. And the world doesn't revolve around you. We used to have a song that we would sing to our boys when they were young, our daughter as well. And it went like this. I hope you don't mind. The world, it doesn't revolve around you, and life, it isn't fair. Boom, boom, boom. The world, it doesn't revolve around you, and life, it isn't fair. To this day, 22 and soon to be 20, they remember that song. Boy, do they. In fact, all I have to do is just whistle the tune. They're like, no! But they got it. And isn't that the truth? That's what Solomon is saying here. That's the lesson to be learned here. And though it be the hard way, at least you learn it. You know what? Life isn't fair. We live in a fallen world. We talked about last week, I always thought that this used to be in the context of God just, raining down on the unjust, But no, he gives rain to the just and the unjust. Every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above, James says. Rain's a good thing when you have crops that need rain to grow. So, in other words, the only fairness and justice can be found in God's economy. If you're looking for it in this life apart from God, you'll never find it. Pursue it all you want. Amass all you can. But in the end, what you'll find is it will never satisfy. It will leave you emptier than you were before you pursued it. Why don't you stand and we'll pray. Father in heaven, thank you. Oh, this is a gnarly book, for lack of a better word, but so good. It's just much needed for us, especially in the day and age in which we live with everything that's going on in the world. Lord, it is becoming very evident that you're loosening our grip on this world and the things of this world. And for those of us who have been guilty of trying to dig our roots down too deep in the temporal soil of this world, are finding and learning that to do so is in vain. Because you did not create us for this world, you created us for eternity. And nothing that we can do will ever satisfy that hunger and that thirst that we have. Only you can satisfy, Lord. I pray that that's the takeaway for all of us tonight. That we'll take away from this the meaning, the purpose of our lives here in this fallen world. Lord, thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.